Welcome to the Soul of Menopause, where we're rewriting the narrative of this transformative journey. From the first hormonal whispers of perimenopause, through menopause and into postmenopause, we're challenging the traditional medical approach that often reduces women's experiences to a set of symptoms. This transition isn't about what we're losing, but who we're becoming. I'm Dr. Corpus, and this is the Soul of Menopause.
Welcome, everybody, back to the second season of our podcast, The Soul of Menopause. So I'm Dr. Corpus, and I'm glad you're here. So this is a space where we get honest about change, healing, and where we figure out what it means to truly come home to ourselves, especially in this powerful, sometimes messy season of menopause. So I'm excited to welcome back our friend to the podcast, Alysa Osvog. And I just want to do a quick intro of her. So, you know how some people just make you feel instantly safe, like you can let your guard down and finally breathe out? That is definitely Alysa. She is a Gateless-trained writing facilitator, a guide for writers and non-writers alike who are looking to recover their creative spark. For over a decade, she's quietly led hundreds of women back to their own words, their own wisdom, and their own sense of joy, often at the very moment when life feels like it's shifting under their feet. Her workshops and writing salons are unlike anything you remember from school. There's no red pen, no pressure to perform, just a gentle invitation to let your imagination lead and to trust whatever arises up on the page. Her approach is inspired by Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, combined with the Gateless method, which blends brain science, somatic ritual, and the radical idea that creativity belongs to all of us. Whether you're in the deep throes of menopause, wrestling with self-doubt, or just longing to hear your own voice again, Alysa creates a space where it's safe to be imperfect, to be surprised, and to remember the power of play. She knows that writing isn't just about words, it's about healing, connection, and coming home to yourself. I'm so honored to welcome back Alysa to the Soul of Menopause. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks, Kay. That was beautiful. I would like a copy of that.
Yeah, you'll get one. No worries.
Thank you.
So, welcome back. So, I just wanted to ask you. So, you've spent years guiding women back to their own creative voices, whether it's in your writing or yoga, even your therapy. So, what first drew you to this work? And what was there a moment you realized that writing was more than just putting words on a page, that it could actually be healing?
I was at a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, and one of the activities we did was a gateless writing salon. I had no idea what was going to come of it. We sat in the little living room with the ocean breeze and sipping coconuts. And the next thing I knew, I was just pouring onto the page these ideas, thoughts, feelings that I hadn't accessed in my life. And after, it was just such that, almost like a shavasana at the end of a yoga practice. And I recognized that there was something in that for me, and that if I could access this, I would love to be able to help other people access this. I'd been a yoga teacher for about 10 years at that time, and I worked primarily in therapeutic settings. And moving the body, guiding breath, movement, all of that is fantastic, but there's a limit. And when we can get beyond that and kind of make a little bit more meaning, turn this formless into form, merge it in with very skilled prompts that help us to really develop into being who we're meant to be. So that's kind of what I've been leading and guiding. I went through the Gateless Academy a few times, led lots of retreats, and worked primarily in therapeutic settings as well. And then since I've bridged into a community that is starting to kind of feel the benefits of dropping into a writing class in the same way they might drop into a yoga class.
That's awesome. So many women in midlife feel their creativity, I know this for myself, is either buried or somehow used up or gone or we don't remember where it went. And we had been creative as, little girls, young women. What would you say to somebody who's convinced that it's too late to start or that creativity is just for other people?
Great question. I mean, creativity really is our innate calling. We were creative when we were little, and then life happens. We become adults in these roles and responsibilities, but it doesn't mean the creativity is gone. It's kind of like when the clouds cover the sun is still there. It's just that process of kind of peeling away what is clouding that access. And that's where the somatic practices, the breath, the anchoring into a sense of safety help us recognize that, yeah, it's okay to kind of think outside the box for a bit. And it's personal. I think that's the fun part about art is we let go of the rules. We give ourselves permission to color outside the lines, to have a completely blank canvas and just put something on it. Every human being has the capacity to do that. It's just giving ourselves permission to do it.
I also feel that there has to be a rewiring around creativity because, a lot of kids, I think, would be artists if they didn't have that one day or one teacher or one caregiver or parent to make a judgment on the artwork or the writing piece. And when it's in school, we get grades for it, right? And so there becomes this comparison and judgment and all of that gets embodied. So we then, if it doesn't get the A or if it, has a C or whatever, therefore then we're not artists or writers. And I think there also some of the somatic work that you're talking about in the neuroplasticity, which you can go into here if you want to, is I find that like we have to rewire that because of, the judgments and the negative thoughts and all of that. I know that when I started painting again and the teachers were like, you can't make a mistake, or that's beautiful. If you make art, you're an artist. Those are unlike, things that I heard, particularly in medicine. It's always like you're always worried, consumed with not making a mistake and being perfect and all of that. And I thought, wow, if those whispers in my ear were like, you can't make a mistake, and and medicine is an art and use your intuition, would be a very different world for practicing medicine. I think it would be really amazing. In fact, very different than the way it is now. So the importance of maybe these practices or these mindsets, intentions before writing or doing art or anything or working for that matter is so important. Could you speak to some of those practices and how the nervous system maybe and the brain are connected to our creativity or expression of it, if you will?
Yeah, so it's practice. Just like any skill, once we first pick it up, it feels kind of awkward, kind of strange, but then we continue doing it. And that's where a supportive community can help with that because we go through this really strategic steps of anchoring into the body, establishing that sense of safety, and then allowing the imagination to kind of take us where it wants to go. When we write, we're going to think it makes any sense. And that's okay. That's great. You just let it flow, pen to paper. when we do the salons, we share. You're not forced to share, of course. It's an invitation. By sharing, it helps to reinforce that echoing back of what we put on pen to paper. We hear ourselves speak it, and then we receive only positive feedback based on the work. So when we hear from strangers what did make sense, where there was resonance, where there was meaning, that builds those little new grooves in the right side of the brain that helps us to reinforce the fact that, yeah, this creativity thing is okay. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to think and feel for ourselves. And in my opinion, that's one of the most valuable skills we can have as human beings. Like you're saying, in medicine, it's so structured and there's such almost a fear and a constriction of getting things wrong. And of course, in medicine, yeah, there's people's lives on the line. So it's kind of important. But when we relax that, when we go into this is play and allow the adult self to play in the same way that that small little child self used to, it's just a welcoming home. It's a remembering.
Well, I think ultimately what you're saying is you're creating a safe place, because bottom line of anything, of moving forward and the ability to want to create repetition and to come back to it is if it's safe. So I think somewhere along the way, and we'll speak to women in midlife, and I believe that creativity is a woman's life force. So somewhere along the way, it wasn't safe to do that anymore. So what I hear you saying then is creating the safe environment between like you as the teacher, you in the community, and you, because it's ultimately the internal thought that keep us from creating.
Well, it's relationship building. And it's relationship building between ourselves, like you're saying. It's relationship building with the creative, this unseen force. And it's relationship building that I am able to establish as the facilitator. So I kind of gauge with the different groups, like, do we already have an established level of trust? And if we do, maybe I can go a little bit deeper. If it's brand new people, we'll keep it really light and breezy. And then gently, gently go into those places that people are feeling comfortable enough to access.
Yes. And so, divulging oneself on paper isn't always a safe act, Oh my gosh, what if somebody reads this, or like even a diary or something, or somebody which there was one woman at our retreat that was not a safe place for her, which was interesting. So all that stuff around it. So yeah, I love the attention to that safety piece, the relational piece. And that's sort of what we need, right? To turn back on the creativity. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you were saying, where like we all seem to have that teacher, or maybe the diary was read, or something happened that squashed the creativity. And it's a writing prompt that I do a lot in many different ways, shapes, forms. Being able to go back into that and kind of rewrite it, or recognize it, or own it, and dissolve that power source that said, no, you can't do this thing anymore, is maybe no longer relevant in our life today. And empower ourselves to do this for ourselves. Where Julia Cameron talks about the morning pages, and those are just for you. Those are just a full brain dump, taking out the trash, stream of consciousness. Nobody reads it. It's so therapeutic to just get that out. When we're in a salon, people can write things down and they don't have to read that sentence if it's too intense. Or they can read it, but because we hold each piece like it's fiction, we only comment on the work. We're not going to process. We're not going to feed back the story. that also helps create this container that feels really safe where anything goes.
I love morning pages. That got me back also into writing. I love the idea of brain dumping. It's not a masterpiece. I still do have my notebooks, and I literally can't even read them because nobody would be able to read them because I cannot even read my writing. But it was so therapeutic, just dumping all of that. So that's how I got my confidence with myself in writing. What would you say to people who are not ready to be in a group, processing in with other people or talking about that?
You can do it on your own. I mean, it's personal in the same way that healing is personal. You find the practitioners that you click with that maybe guide and nudge you back to yourself. And until we feel that sense of sovereignty, it's totally an empowering practice. So there's no need to force it. If there's angst in that, in my experience, have found the people that were very resistant in the beginning become the biggest supporters. They're able to push through that barrier that held them back. And there's like an interesting dance with art of like the friction and the flow. And that also helps us to release the feel-good chemicals in the brain because we have this writing prompt. We might be a little pressured, or we have morning pages that we told ourselves we're going to do, and we do it. And that is overcoming a challenge. After we do it, if we so choose to then be in the group and share in it, that's overcoming another challenge. And so every time we overcome these obstacles, we help to release that dopamine. And by the end, I mean, my groups, I've had people that share the walls with me, either in therapeutic settings, or last week I was at my mom's house in Colorado and I led a Zoom, and she said, you just laugh the whole time. And like the therapeutic settings, they're like, what are you doing there? You guys are just laughing so much. And it's true. Something bubbles up, something happens with the power of creativity. And there's just this joy, this excitement. And even the pieces that might be a little heavy, there's only the comments that hold it up as art, hold it up as beautiful. And in that, we find a sense of relief. We let something go that hold us back from the shame, the pain, the programming, that this isn't right. And it is right. It's creativity. It's art.
Awesome. I also find, for myself, I find it's an active encounter where you're encountering yourself. So that in itself could be very scary for some people. So, like you said, there could be a stepwise process to that. It could take a couple years even to get the writing down and just encounter yourself and what you're feeling, or even acknowledging the things that are coming up in your head, because most people suppress that or repress it or push it away. But it's a nice encounter and connection to oneself.
Well, it's the encountering, and it's this often what we are referred to in the Gateless method is the inner critic. And it's that inner critic that's saying, oh, don't you dare go there. Don't you write that. That's not perfect. And it's often the perfectionism that holds us back from accessing that. And it might be very, very strong, a very firm program that we've operated in perfectionism for decades. And it's going to take consistent practice to begin to dismantle that and kind of set that aside for a moment. That's why in the beginning, we do the somatic work to drift into the right side of the brain and let go of the logical, the fight, flight, freeze, the having to be an exact certain way, and just allow ourselves to drop into that flow.
In the Red School, we also talk about the inner critic, and what we do with the inner critic is we give the inner critic boundaries. There are some things that the critic can say, and there are things that are completely off limits. So you can't make a judgment of like, I sucked because I didn't do this, but you can say this wasn't completed, or do you know what I mean? There's an objective versus like an interpretation, like truth versus an interpretation. And I think giving the inner critic boundaries of what it's allowed to say and what's allowed to comment on and not comment on, and how that's actually verbally said, I think is actually a brilliant way of getting past the inner critic. So to sum up about the morning pages, which is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. So what we're saying is, could you go over the process? So it's deceptively simple, and we just say, just write, but it is deeply transformative. So could you sum up what happens psychologically, emotionally, and maybe even spiritually when we make this practice like part of our daily lives?
I like to think of it, and that's where Julia Cameron also refers to it, as this shift in consciousness. In the same way that if we practice yoga consistently, something shifts, different than if we just exercise. If we practice creativity consistently, something shifts. We do begin this process of reprogramming. And retreats, it is so incredible to see how the writing explodes when we write day after day after day and are supported in a really safe container of people operating on that same frequency. In therapeutic settings, I see people come in on day one extremely resistant. And I know that because I was one of them. And I really didn't want to do any of the practices suggested. I wanted to stay in my own head because none of it worked. And yet very slowly, very gradually, one little piece at a time, one little act of opening up at a time allows us to soften into that being. And I've seen people be able to go from writing one sentence, bullet pointing, to writing these profound pieces that just blow me away. And again, it's not about creating some kind of perfect prose. It's about accessing this art that is so ready to come out. And we're just giving it a little avenue or an outlet to be expressed.
Awesome. So you use the Gateless method, which weaves together brain science, somatic, ritual, and community. Can you describe what it actually feels like to enter this kind of space and why it's so different from the typical writing workshop?
There's no room for the inner critic. So often people in writing programs are critiqued quite often, and that squashes the creativity. When we comment only positive feedback based on the work, what we're doing well continues to explode. Again, like there's friends that I've had that started the Gateless method and they've published books. They've gone on to be speakers and authors, and I hope to be one of them one day. But it doesn't come from being pigeonholed into, okay, you got to do it this way. It's just a very natural way of building those grooves, improving the craft skills of the writing by hearing what is working. And then the subconscious just begins to do more of that. In Gateless retreats, it's fascinating how just that level of consciousness changes within the community, because we keep that whole Gateless approach throughout, where we don't really criticize one another. We hold up what's working in all areas of life. We give positive feedback on everything. And at first it might seem a little awkward, a little strange, But for just a short amount of time to operate that way, it's what our spirit craves. We naturally blossom, and it carries through all aspects of life. And that's what I love about the work is it not only builds confidence on the page, it builds confidence in life.
Yes, beautiful. So there's a moment in your writing salons where you invite people to write from their unfiltered voice. Why do you think this voice is so hard for many women to access, and what changes when we finally let it speak? You did allude to this.
We're not familiar with it. We don't know it. It's like speaking a foreign language. And I know for myself, when I was at that first writer's retreat, or it was a yoga retreat that became an eye-opening writer's retreat for me, I was able to speak with memories and emotions and kind of piece together parts of my life I never had before. And that can be scary. It can be eye-opening, and it might be something that we don't want to really see. But it's also incredibly empowering because you're the one writing it. You can flip the script at any time. And when we recognize that power, when we can really hone into the strength of that, it's incredible.
Beautiful. So you talk about creativity as a kind of recalibration, moving from doing into being, from perfectionism to play. How do you help women and men make that leap, especially those who've spent years in caregiving or high pressure jobs and high pressure roles?
Just a little bit at a time. It doesn't have to be this major life overhaul. But if we think 24/7, we're in the left side of the brain, fight, flight, or freeze, go, 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 having the to-do list, making sure everything is accomplished. Sometimes that's necessary. That's adulting. But what if we were to just give ourselves 1 hour a day? Just 1 hour a day to play. Just a little bit of time to do some morning pages. Again, it's that relationship building where if we first meet somebody, we start with a hi. Maybe we go to coffee, grab a walk, then dinner, then it's gradual. So there's no need to force the relationship within yourself, but welcome it in. Start to do it in a way that feels good. Maybe piggyback some writing or art with other activities that you thoroughly enjoy, or even accomplishments that you know are going to satisfy that left side of the brain, and then do something playful. It's personal too, where I've worked with individuals on being able to kind of ease into a way that feels like this is what their soul has been craving. And that could be like with you, painting, someone else exploring another creative avenue that nobody really has to make sense of. It doesn't have to fit in with the roles that they play in most of their life, but there's something inside that is ready to play in that direction.
So we live in this world that's obsessed with outcomes and productivity. How do you help people trust the process of writing for its own sake, not just for what it might produce at the end?
I think that's kind of like the difference between reading a menu and having the meal. You just have to try it. You just have to dive in and see how it works. Yes, there's guidance, there's coaching, there's salons, there's books, but it's the process of experiencing it that is going to make sense for someone. And then once they experience it, once they get a taste of it, game on.
Can you share a story without breaking anybody's confidence, but of a time you saw somebody's experience to breakthrough or healing through writing in your sessions?
There's been so so many times. And as a facilitator, I don't often cry because I'm holding the space. And yet I have seen such breakthroughs when people are not in a therapeutic setting being diagnosed or processed, and they have the freedom to really just let it out. I've had people be able to connect dots from childhood trauma and go into really loving that inner child again. I've had people develop a consistent practice where I continue working with them for years. And they do it because it is this process of remembering. There's a client that I've been working with for a while who was really just locked up with a lot of physical pain and had, all the diagnoses, all the physical ways of being able to manage that pain and work through the pain. But there was something about the art of creativity that she's been able to really soften. And it's not that it is a cure-all by any means. It is a shifting into an alignment that was blocked, where if there's this one little thing that she knows she has access to at any time, anywhere, you can pick up a pen and a piece of paper and get something out. That can be incredibly powerful.
Beautiful. So the community aspect of your salons is so powerful. Why do you think it's important to share our creative work in a supportive group instead of alone or in silence?
So that's where the brain science really does come in. When we are in a community, there can be such ancient, innate way of bonding like a tribe. We begin to feel that coherence by breathing in the same rhythm, opening up into that same kind of field of heart-centered thoughts and feelings. When we aren't really friends with someone and we don't have an agenda or expectation, but we just admire their art. When we have strangers comment and feedback sincerely on how much they appreciate our art, it helps to relax the nervous system in a way that I believe we were designed. Storytelling is medicine. And it goes back to when we were in the caves thousands and thousands of years ago. This is what we did. And so by being in that community, it's incredibly healing. And it also helps to overcome those challenges. It's terrifying. Most of us are out in the world playing these roles where it depends upon people liking us. And when that doesn't really matter anymore, we just let the art speak for itself. It's so amazing what opens up. And one of my favorites is how the words begin to talk to one another. So we all have blank pieces of paper. And yeah, there'll be a writing prompt, but they don't have to write on the prompt. They can just start with that or go into something else. And when we share, there are little, what I like to call whispers in the white space that come up that were not on the prompt. There'll be themes, there'll be emotions, there'll be really specific details that people will all have in their writing. And it blows us away. I'm going to get into goosebumps right now, even just talking about it, because that is the power of tapping into something far greater than ourselves. And it doesn't matter what kind of belief system we have all have access in this creativity. It can be absolutely a divine intervention of what can come through if we open up to that power.
It sounds like what you're talking about, particularly with community, is also the sense of belonging. And so when we don't feel like we belong, that's, that we feel alone and disconnected to anything and everyone, which can also upregulate the nervous system. So it sounds like in what you're saying is like when you start having this resonance, attunement, regulating nervous systems, regulating to each other, and then divine things start happening. It's like, oh yeah, like we're all connected here and we belong. And that's really healing, honestly, because many women do feel like they're the only ones going through this or experiencing it because nobody talks about it and nobody shares, because it's not really safe to do so. So it sounds like another level of healing in there. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And I'll just add one more where we try to avoid, especially in the beginning, small talk. There's no need to kind of get to know each other in these little human roles we play all the time, because that is in that smaller left side mindset. Not that the left side is small, but like the smaller mind of putting on a mask. And when we just allow the art to speak for itself, when we get to know one another through these words, that forms incredible bonds and relationships that can last a lifetime.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So for women listening who are afraid to start or who feel stuck and silenced, what's the first kindest step they can take to begin writing their way back to themselves?
Go back to like what brings you joy and find a little piece of joy to set up a ritual. And that could be buying a pretty journal or a pen, or just grabbing some scratch paper but lighting a candle, being out in nature, having a piece of chocolate with the practice, building in just a little bit of a reward system so that the whole process of starting isn't so scary. And then it'll just start little. It could start small in a personal way. Julia Cameron outlines it really beautifully. But I also recommend, diving into one of my salons, hopping in online. Online is a really safe way to just be on the screen. And then you're in your own comforts. And it's only an hour. And see what it's like. See how it feels. See where the nervous system was able to respond. Have experience working with people that just willingly show up. But then a lot of people from therapeutic settings that are in a program, and this is part of the schedule. So I've worked through a lot of resistance before. And I have to say, it's not just me that gets them through that hump. But very, very rarely do they stay. They dive in. And I believe that's the desire for us all to create. And we have that inside of us. It's just giving permission to let it out.
So for anyone who feels inspired by this conversation, how can they get in touch with you and learn more about your work?
So I have a little healing art studio in Santa Ynez, California. We do in-person salons on Fridays, 12:15 California time, as well as online, Fridays, 12:15 California time. I'm also doing a book study with the Artist Way, Julia Cameron's, so that we can feel the support and camaraderie of going through the book together. So that is on Sundays starting in June at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, in person and online. They're all designed to be just like dropping into a yoga class, dropping into something that is fun, enjoyable. It doesn't have to be this major, like, I'm going to do this huge overhaul reprogramming of everything I've ever known before. Just try it, like trying something new on a menu. And you're not going to know if you like it unless you take a first bite. And so I encourage to just, if you're curious, if you're listening, if something inside of you, you're feeling that quickening, go there. That's what we want to access. That's what we want to come back alive, is that little small voice that was so eager to share when we were little and wasn't filtered by all the other things that held us back, that we hold ourselves back from today, myself included. That's why I'm doing the artist way, because I want to dive back into my creative.
Awesome. So how can practically people join and sign up?
So, HausHealingArtStudio.com, HAUS, HealingArtStudio.com, or email me, Alysa at HausHealingArtStudio.com.
Perfect. How beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing this side of yourself. You have a lot of aspects, beautiful creative aspects and outlets to yourself. So this one is really exciting. It seems like it's really aligned with who you are as well, and you've definitely found your calling. So thank you so much for joining us.
Today's conversation is just one thread in the larger tapestry of our shared experience. Help us spread the word. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, rate us on your favorite podcast platform, or tag us on social media. We're at Corpus MD, and we want to build a community that transforms how we understand this incredible life stage. Find more resources and connect with us at kcorpusmd.com. Trust your body, embrace your wisdom. I'm Dr. K, and this is the Soul of Medicine podcast.